Hey everybody, it's Koraguma and welcome to a review of Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 2. This was a big one. This is the one we've been waiting for the most part. There's been some major shakeups. First, let's talk about the episode title, Home. Of course, this most clearly refers to Theon's statement that he wants to go home. He will not be accompanying Brienne and Sansa to the Wall to meet up with Jon Snow, but he wants to go home. And before we talk about the Iron Islands and, of course, Pike, let's talk a little bit about Sansa. So, the fact that Theon is basically the only tie to her family that she has left is definitely sad. Getting the news that Arya is alive and she's dressing up like a boy, Sansa sort of smiles a little bit, remembering her sister. And when she admits, she should have gone with Brienne in the first place, and Brienne really lets her off easy, saying it was a difficult choice. It was a really powerful scene that I enjoyed. The stuff with Brienne and Sansa is great to have two, people on the side of good together finally, combining their influence and forces. Sansa has been too long under the thumb of Littlefinger, who has been conspicuously absent this season so far. But Littlefinger, you've got to think about his original plan when he brought her to Winterfell, under the guise of being his niece. What was his master plan? Because he never came back to check on her, and he let Ramsay do, horrible things, and just what Sansa had to go through, in her home of Winterfell was very hard to watch last season. And you've got to really think that Littlefinger, who you thought maybe had some fondness for her, absolutely just used her as a pawn. But what is his endgame? Does he seek the Iron Throne for himself? Hopefully this season we see Littlefinger and we're given some more insight into what his motivations are. And once her work is done, once her training is done, will Arya even acknowledge that she has a sister? If she was to meet Sansa again, as remote of a possibility as that is when you look at where these two characters are in relationship to each other in the world, would she, A, recognize her sister? And if she did, would she even want to acknowledge her, or would she even be allowed to acknowledge her? Would the many-faced god allow her to say, "Oh, hi Sansa, oh hey, I'm a faceless man now, hey, it's crazy, what have you been up to?" I don't think so. I don't think she would even, she would be so deep into her new guise that she wouldn't even recognize her. Maybe her face would even be different. That's part of the whole point. But it was her clinging to her past life as Arya Stark that cost her her sight. And Jaqen is giving her the opportunity. If a girl says her name, she'll have shelter, she'll have food, she'll have her sight back. And Arya says no. And he brings her back to the temple, to the House of Black and White. It was wrapped up a little quickly. I was prepared for almost half a season of her as a beggar, learning her humility and learning what it is to be no one. But thinking of the way that they did it, I like that they brought her back. And I think that it just gets things moving a little bit quicker. If she was, 5 or 6 episodes on the street begging, getting hit with a stick, that would get stale pretty quick now that I'm thinking it through. So it was good that we've moved to the next step of her training, even though it seemed a little bit rushed. I'll give them the creative license to rush that along, because I think we got the point. She's being punished by the many-faced god for clinging to her past life. And, she's, at this point, she's done her time, as far as I'm concerned. Thinking of another Stark child that we haven't seen in a very long time that has much to learn is, of course, Bran. Now, when you look at Mira and how frustrated she is at how long this training has taken, he's clearly aged 2 years in that tree in such a small time. And the Three-Eyed Raven has been recast as Max von Sydow. And hopefully they use him to his full potential, because he's, obviously a great actor. But when we look at his training and this vision that the Raven gave him of his past, seeing a young Ned and Benjen, and of course Lyanna comes riding in on the horse, and it was Lyanna who set everything into motion. The Robert's Rebellion and all of that. It was very interesting to see, and I was so taken up in the moment as well. Of course, seeing young Willis Hodor, as a stable boy, talking and being very normal. I was very into the moment too. I didn't want it to end either. So when the Raven rips him out and says, it's beautiful beneath the sea, but if you stay too long, you might drown. It was very touching to see. Bran said, "Finally, you show me something I'm interested in, and you rip me away, but you can't stay there." He needs to learn the lesson, and he needs to practice his new craft and move forward. And that's what the Three-Eyed Raven's making him do. Arya and Bran both training to be Jedi Masters, basically. They both have their own Obi-Wans that are teaching them what they need to know. And more Children of the Forest, please. Love the Children of the Forest. We only got a brief glimpse of her, but I'm very interested in that. It reminds me as well, it was something I like to do, go back and watch the very first episode of Game of Thrones, season 1, and seeing all the Starks together again, seeing Ned and Catelyn just kind of, watching their children smiling, and there's Jon, and there's, he's talking to Arya. It's like looking through an old photo album, because, over 6 years we've come to really care about these characters, those of whom are still alive, and it's pleasurable to go back in time and see them all together again, so I can see where Bran is coming from. Speaking of things that are beautiful beneath the sea, let's talk about Balon Greyjoy, who is finding out how beautiful it is beneath the sea, probably right around now. So now, all 5 kings are gone. The War of the 5 Kings, of course, Renly and Stannis Baratheon, Joffrey, and Robb Stark, of course, King of the North, and now Balon Greyjoy. So just moments after he was, I don't want to say bragging, but he was talking about he's the last one left. He's stabbed and thrown over that bridge by his brother. His brother, who seemingly came out of nowhere. We haven't seen this character before, I don't think. And this was Euron Greyjoy, as far as I know. I didn't catch if they actually said his name, but we knew it was his younger brother. And this was an example of telling, not showing for me a little bit, when they were describing his past, naval exploits. Oh, you're such a feared commander, and oh, you're such a crazy guy. Wait till you see this new character, what he's up for. I would have preferred that they showed a scene of him on the seas, pillaging or doing whatever he does, and showing why he's so fearsome. If we saw him before, I apologize. He just didn't make enough of an impression on me that I remembered, but I think this is the first time we've seen the character. And I don't think it was, on paper, it's a great opening. The scene on the swinging bridge was beautifully shot. It was really well done in that storm. Who would go across that bridge in their right mind? Why is there such a bridge? But Balon went out on the bridge, and to meet his brother right then and there, it looks really good on paper, but it just was a poor introduction to the character of Euron for me. It's going to be very interesting to see when Theon returns home, how he will factor in to all the upheaval happening there. Will he just fall under the yoke of his uncle, or will he actually fight against him and try to either support his sister Yara, or, what is he going to do? He's very much a broken man, and he's still a Greyjoy though, and he wants to go home, and he wants to probably see his father and try to just carve out some kind of an existence on Pike. But now he's put in a position where he is the last surviving son of Balon Greyjoy. So what sort of a threat can he be in his current state to Euron's plans of being king of the Iron Islands? I've heard some people complaining online that Pike is just another Dorne. It's a faraway place we don't care about, but I couldn't disagree more. I found Pike to be very interesting. I very much like the Iron Islands, the Iron Price, the Ironborn, and their drowned god. I think it's pretty interesting. And if you've been paying attention, they've been a major, if secondary, player in the story since the beginning. The scene with Tyrion letting the dragons loose, the acting by Peter Dinklage was so great. He's just doing what he does best. Of course, acting probably against a green screen, but he gave it so much feeling, and he's just so smooth about it. He says, "I'm a friend of your mother's," and he says, "I'm here to help. Don't eat the help." It was pitch perfect, and the scene, the way that they emoted, the dragons, when they saw him, they recognized him as supposedly a friend, and they patiently waited for him to unlock the chains. And then when he unlocked the first one, the second one was just like got in his face and was showing the collar. I thought that was great because he knows. He's like, "Let me go," and he does. And I feel like those are 2 pieces. I keep talking about the chessboard, that you need those pieces in play. Having them locked up does the story no service, and it does Dany no service, who was conspicuously absent this week. No Dany this week. But you've got to think letting these dragons loose is a risky proposition at best. But I really enjoyed the imagery as well when he was talking about Aegon's dragons and how they ranged over hundreds of miles and they were free. Very, very evocative image. And I can just picture that, and it seems like that's the sort of existence that they would thrive in. Obviously, no animal wants to be caged, so to let them loose, it opens up new story possibilities. They may even be a factor in bringing Dany back to Meereen. So let's briefly touch on Winterfell. The Karstarks pledging to the Boltons after what Robb did, taking the head of the leader of the Karstarks. That was a move that the Blackfish, who rumor has it we're going to see in upcoming weeks, was very much against. And it showed Robb's weak political acumen to the situation that he would do that. He should have been more flexible, but that was part of his undoing, was his strict adherence to this outdated code, as I've heard it put. So obviously the Karstarks are still very much against the Starks, and they're going to throw in with the Boltons at this point. So Roose has been, I hate to say it, but again, kind of level-headed, even though he's very, very evil. But he seems more lawful evil, if you will, whereas Ramsay is chaotic evil. And Fat Walda, that's what her name is in the wiki. She gives birth to a son, which is now the biggest threat to Ramsay, and he takes out his father, and then in very unceremonious fashion takes out Walda and the baby as well, which was just brutal. It didn't strike me quite the same way as when Janos Slynt was killing all the babies in the brothel, or when last year when Stannis burned Shireen. That was for some reason even more horrible to me. This one, you don't want to see obviously any children in any kind of peril. On Walking Dead, I always shy away whenever they put Judith in direct peril. I don't like that at all. But this, while it's obviously horrible, it just didn't hit me on that level. It was just like, more, masochism by Ramsay. It's just what you expect at this point. So it wasn't maybe as shocking. So now at this point, just to recap, we've lost Doran Martell and Roose Bolton and Balon Greyjoy, 3 older, established, fairly wise to, arguably wise, level-headed rulers for the most part. And in their place, we now have Ellaria Sand. Side note I didn't pick up on, Sand is the version of Snow. Basically, she's a bastard, so they call all the bastards Sand. I thought that was interesting in Dorne. So we have Ellaria Sand, who's, murderous psychopath. We have Euron Greyjoy, again, murderous psychopath, and Ramsay Bolton, no introduction necessary. So the chessboard is being cleared of a lot of the old guard, and we have 3 mad dogs, as Roose put it, shoved onto the scene in positions of great power. So I don't know if I like where things are headed. It almost makes Cersei seem like the lesser of the evils at this point, which I can't believe I'm rooting for Cersei. Speaking of King's Landing, the High Sparrow, very, very brave, but he has to know that Jaime commands the Kingsguard. And, his 10 guys with, spears and cloth armor are going to do nothing. So he really shouldn't make threats that he can't back up. I did enjoy that Cersei was not there at the funeral, because if it had been her and Jaime over another dead body, it just would have been an echo of Joffrey's funeral, and then Tywin's funeral, and now of course this one. And it was a better, I thought it was a stronger scene without her there, because it gave Jaime and the High Sparrow a little one-on-one time to actually size each other up, do some circling, if you will. So the look of relief on the guard's face as well when Cersei stands down, when she's not allowed to leave the Red Keep, and the Mountain turns around slowly and walks away, and the guard's just like, whew. I thought that was really well done. I think we all kind of felt that way, because I have no doubt, I don't think the guard had any doubt either, that the Mountain would carve through them like a knife carving through a cake, to paraphrase the great... It's just too many characters. I'm a fan, and I cannot keep them all straight. It's in here. I'm not gonna look it up. It's in here. Barristan Selmy. See, it just took me a second to paraphrase Barristan Selmy. So we pretty much circled the globe. We've touched on all the major points, and that brings us to the Wall and the standoff in the room, which was broken by the arrival of Tormund Giantsbane and Wun, the great giant, as they break the door down. And very much like when Zombie Mountain, just the guy who was bragging about showing himself to Cersei, just pushing him against the wall, breaking his head. It was echoed by Wun taking the guy who shot the arrow into his back and just taking him and just smashing him against a wall. And everybody very wisely throws down their arms, and they throw Alistair Thorne into jail, into a cell. I thought they were going to kill him, but they made the decision to lock him up, so he's still on the board as a piece. And I liked very much the line,
The only traitors here are the ones who stuck a knife in our Lord Commander. Was that good? Did that work for anyone?
I feel like in seasons past, Alistair enters the room, the wildlings don't show up, and and he kills everyone. And then he actually goes south of the wall and he finds Sam and Gilly, kills them too. But it seems like good things were happening this week. There's some good things happening. I'm seeing maybe a light at the end of the tunnel here. If we can just get rid of Ramsay, I think we're doing pretty well. So let's get right into it. Melisandre overcomes her crisis of faith, and just like Thoros of Myr said, he's basically said, I just say the words. So I'm yelling at my TV. Melisandre, just say the words. Who cares if you believe you can do it? Just say it. Leave it to the Lord of Light to decide if he or she is going to answer or not. But your job right now is to just say the words. And she does. And as everyone leaves, you've got to believe, he's been on ice for a while. Give things a few minutes to percolate. And the shots of Ghost under the table waiting were so pitch perfect. And they could have gone either way with it. At the end, when Ghost picks up his head, if George R.R. Martin had said he does not come back, it would have been very easy for Ghost to just kind of look up and go and kind of whimper and put his head back down. And just to show you that it didn't work. But it did work. Jon opens his eyes. Jon Snow is back, everyone. And there was great applause and great rejoicing by everyone. And in the preview for next week, they think he's some kind of a god. And I'm very, very excited, as everyone is, to see what happens with that. So, the Lord of Light is going to do what it wants to do. You just have to ask. And was that too predictable with all the speculation and all the conspiracy theorists watching Kit Harington, arrive in Belfast? What does his hair look like? Does anyone know if he's signed on for any new projects? And is he just filming as a corpse and just trying to really figure out if he's going to come back or not? Maybe he's in a flashback. It's done. He is back. But just as Beric Dondarrion said, each time you come back, you lose a little bit of your memory and you lose a little bit of yourself. So will this be the Jon Snow that everyone's hoping to see, that we remember, or will this be a different entity? I want to add as well, they have cut Lady Stoneheart from the books out of the show, more or less. I think it's too late. The moment's kind of passed to introduce her and actually bring back, the vengeful spirit of Catelyn Stark. So could they give that role to Jon Snow? And he comes back cruel and vengeful, and he wreaks vengeance on the Boltons, takes back Winterfell. But maybe he's too much of a force of nature to control. Or it could just be the Jon that we've come to know and love. And we can hope for that. So one thing I want to close on in this episode called Home, there was a strong theme of family. Obviously, Theon Greyjoy just wants to go home. And the great scenes between Cersei and Tommen, he just didn't want to lose his mother. And his mother is going to, she'll always be there to help her son. And of course, when you think about Roose Bolton and Ramsay Bolton and what's going on between those two, and he wants to be the heir, and he says, "You'll always be my firstborn son." He says, "Thank you for saying that, Father," and then he stabs him right in the stomach. Very, very interesting family dynamics abounded this week. When we look forward to next week, Oathbreaker. I wonder if it's a reference to Brienne of Tarth's sword, reforged by Tywin Lannister from Ned Stark's ice. Oathkeeper. I wonder if she could be a major factor, or if not, then who is the Oathbreaker? But as always, we will see you next week. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to subscribe to get updates all season long, and we'll see you next week.